Hi, I'm Johny and today we're going to survive in the hellishly hot world of RimWorld. In the world settings, I selected the maximum temperature and now the standard temperature will range from plus 50 to plus 80 degrees Celsius. I think that this is a rather difficult game mode, so I really hope that the video will turn out to be interesting and rich. I have chosen 3 colonists, each of whom is responsible for a certain area that is very important for our survival. He is a doctor scientist, a cook gardener, and also a colonist who is very good at his craft. Since this is a very difficult game mode, each of my colonists knows how to build and dig well. Well, let's start. My very main task was to keep my colonists alive at the beginning of the game, because the heat began to attack in the first minutes. Because of this, I was forced to build a house as soon as possible and fill it with something that can somehow cool the room. For this, I used coolers that work on wood. I filled the room with 6 of these coolers, and in general my colonists could live in the room. The main problem with this scenario was that it required maximum microcontrol, because the heat affected my colonists almost instantly, because of which they were always on the edge of life and death. For example, you can cite the fact that one of my colonists fell from a sunstroke in the very first minutes of the game, and he was saved only by the fact that the house was already completed and the fact that he fell right next to it. After the house was completed, I decided that it was necessary to expand deep into the cave, and little by little I dug out a small warehouse. After that, I started almost manually sending my colonists for resources, because the heat was attacking as hard as ever before. Half of the time I played I was busy changing the zones where my colonists can move. 90% of the time my colonists were indoors going about their routine, and only a short time they went outside to get steel, components, and dismantle fallen shipwrecks. The first thing after I somehow arranged and put the house in order, I started researching batteries and hydroponics. And by the way, in this scenario, I understood what it means to use air conditioners to the maximum. In general, during the recording of this video, air conditioners became my best friends. I built them wherever I could and as much as possible. Also, my colonists built a small refrigerator so that there was a place to store food, and in general, during the entire time, I almost did not face any problems inside the room. Even if the air conditioners didn't work or the power went out, my wood coolers were always close at hand. As for the hydroponic farm, I can say that I built it a little crookedly, so if you want to write in the comments that it is built crookedly, then write it and give me the statistics of the video. I will be very grateful. By the way, do not forget to subscribe and like this video, as well as watch other videos on the channel. It is still worth talking about the raiders. The whole joke is that almost no raider was able to reach our base because of the heat. Only some species represented in the game can survive in such heat. By the way, for the same reason, no plants grew at all except those that grow on my hydroponic farm, and there were no animals at all. Because of this, the question of how to get food became very important. But fortunately, I managed to research and build a farm, which gave me the opportunity to live all these 100 days. I would also like to note that the heat was not hellish all the time. Somewhere around autumn, the temperature dropped to 50 degrees Celsius. Yes, it doesn't sound very encouraging, but my colonists could stay outside much longer than usual. It was at this time that I engaged in mass mining of resources that were far from my base. Basically, the main thing I was doing was finding resources on the street while microcontrolling all the actions of my colonists, because without my control they would just die. And I also tried to develop my home as best as possible, because 90% of the time my colonists were in it, and therefore I wanted to use the living space as useful for myself and as pleasant for them as possible. The main idea is to first make a good defense, and secondly to make my home as independent as possible from the environment. In general, everything happened like that. I built a fairly large warehouse, a refrigerator, and a hydroponic farm where I grew rice, cotton, and medicinal root. At some point, when my base became relatively autonomous and the enemies could not reach it as before, I decided that it was necessary to build a defense. The first thing I did was the wall that surrounded my house and a small area around it, because outside were my solar panels and windmill. But at some point, the air temperature became hotter and hotter, which led me to the idea of creating a room between the house and the kill box, and cooling this room with the help of air conditioners. There is a great logic in this. First of all, this is an additional room where my colonists can rest between forays into the street, and it will also allow us to participate in the defense in the event of a raid without fear of collapsing from heat stroke. After the room was cooled, I decided that it was necessary to put 2 turrets in it that would help us repel attacks, because I was sure that in the near future I would be attacked by enemies who could fight the heat. At the same time, I decided that it was very important to arm my colonists properly. I gave them a shotgun, a sniper rifle, and a machine gun. In theory, we will be able to shoot the enemy on the approach to the base and not damage our wooden traps, because as I said before, because of the heat, nothing grows, including trees. As for the raids for which I was preparing, they actually took place. They were attacks by groups of 5 or 7 raiders, which we, in most cases, shot at the approach with a machine gun and a sniper rifle, and to be very honest, so far we do not feel any threats from raiders. And by the way, different people often wanted to join us, and there were also many quests to join, but of course I refused because it is impossible to microcontrol a large number of colonists. But even so, one colonist joined us because he simply came to us on the map and I had no choice whether to agree to his joining or not. In general, he will be useful for defense and other light work, so let him stay. At some point, I decided that I needed to improve the appearance of our house as much as possible and began to install floor tiles throughout the base. In general, it took quite a lot of time and I used a lot of resources, but I was more than satisfied with the result and our base as a whole became quite attractive. And I also built a communication console with which I could buy things that simply cannot be obtained otherwise in this scenario. For example, you can take good medicines and components that are already nearing their end on my map. I also bought Nutramine with which you can also make medicines. By the way, even in spite of the heat, I performed the missions that were offered to me, but mainly they were missions where I needed to take care of the sick people or similar colonists, whom I simply did not let out of the house so that they would not die. In general, at this stage of the game, when my house became practically autonomous and well protected, I stopped experiencing the same great difficulties as at the very beginning of the game. But it is worth saying that it took me about 6 hours to record this material, so it is not surprising that after so much time I was able to adapt to the rules of this scenario. I think this is the end of this video. Thanks for watching, and if you liked this video, please subscribe to the channel, like and comment to promote this video. Johny was with you. Goodbye.